Hi everyone, good evening. This is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and I realize I always say good evening, but it's not necessarily evening for those of you who are watching this. But clearly you will all know my nocturnal habits by now from my regularly greeting you guys in that way. Okay, well today we're going to take a look at another zombie opening / move order video or presentation. And this time it's going to focus on one particular opening or set of, one opening and one main idea. And it's in the Sicilian, I regret to inform some of you. And even the Nightorf will occasionally rear its ugly head. So I apologize for that. But don't think of this as the super quick Nightorf part 3000 or whatever it is. But as, again, attempting to elicit sensitivity in those of you who are watching to issues of move orders and thinking about the difference that little move order changes can make. Alright, so we're going to start with a classical Sicilian, so that's this variation. Remember, it's only a Richter Rouser, or I think better, Rouser attack if white plays bishop to g5. But as long as we don't do that, this is just the classical, and that would be a sub-variation within it. Anyway, what I want to focus in on are a number of variations where black plays this pawn to e5, and there's a d5 hole to deal with. Okay, so here we'll look at bishop to e2, which is one of the variations that is a traditional response to the classical and hopes to exploit it. So e5, and now let's look at one of the main ideas. So white plays knight to f3 here. Okay, this is the standard move. And you might wonder, well, why does white put the knight on f3 where it blocks the f pawn, among other things? Well, let's see. So anyway, the kind of variation we have goes like this. So h6 is the main move here. White castles, bishop e7, rook e1, castles, white plays h3 to prevent black from playing bishop to g4 in some cases, or also to prevent, in other cases, knight to g4 on bishop to e3. But generally here, bishop to g4 is what white is trying to take care of. After bishop e6, bishop goes back to f1, the pawn goes to b3, and it's kind of a funny variation because both players, it seems, are correcting mistakes made in the opening. So black brings the knight back from c6 to b8 to d7, and then plays a6 like it's a Nightorf. White drops this bishop back to f1 as if it's doing something really exciting there. Okay, now a5, rook c8, bishop b2. Again, kind of a peculiar position. But what white is hoping to play, I mean, white at some point wants to play the knight to d5 and to create this 4-on-3 queenside clamp. And there are a lot of games in this variation. I would suggest to any of you who are interested to take a look at the Barua Holliefman games from Las Vegas 1999, the World Championship. It's kind of surprising, but Holliefman's toughest match was in the first round, and I think twice he had to come back, at least once, and maybe twice he had to come back from being a game down to prolong the match. And he just had a terrible time on the black side of this variation, losing, I think, at least 2 games and being in serious trouble in another one. So that, I would say, is a very fine match to examine what some of the problems that black can have in this variation happen to be. Okay, well, that's the variation that we're going to start with. Okay, so we see this, and now let's maybe ask ourselves, well, what's the difference if white plays knight to b3? Okay, how is this any different? Well, here black never plays h6, but we might try to figure out, well, why not? Why does he not care about it? So here he plays bishop to e7. Okay, well, take a couple of minutes and see if you can figure out why black doesn't have to sheepishly play h6 in this position. So why is h6 completely unnecessary here? Okay, well, the quick answer is that on bishop to e7, bishop to g5, this is the whole point of white's strategy. He wants to take on f6 and have control over d5. Well, here, black can simply play knight takes e4. This is the big point. Okay, so if white grabs the bishop, he gets nothing. Knight takes c3, takes, rook d1. Okay, white gets the pawn back, but after, let's say, king e7, rook to d2, a5, and then b6, black is completely fine. In fact, black can even be a little bit better for a couple of reasons. So one is, or a big one, is this central majority. And as it advances, there are enough pieces left on the board that this could end up cramping white to some extent. Also, black is pretty well set up on the queen side to prevent white's majority from really getting moving anytime soon. So for these reasons, black should be in quite good shape here. And the knight on b3 is also pretty poorly posted. Okay. Also here, if black prefers, he can play king to c7, and on a rook to d2, maybe b6, f6, and here as well. Black has just no problems at all. I would prefer to have black here. Alright, so bishop takes e7 in response to knight takes e4 is nothing special. And, okay, knight takes e4 looks more attractive superficially, but alright, after king to e7, black has no difficulties here either. His king is not going to be in any danger. In many lines, there's simply going to be a queen trade. And if after knight c8, rook c8, white tries to avoid it with bishop to d3, black can either play g6 and castle artificially with king f8, g7, or he can play knight to b4, which is a little bit more ambitious. Castles, takes, and then deal with king safety. So, because there aren't really that many open lines, black should be okay here. So, going back to here, bishop to d3 to avoid the trade of queens is not really all that fantastic. And on castles, okay, black just trades, plays rook f to d8, and is essentially safe. I mean, both players are fine here. I mean, it's not that black is better, but white certainly has nothing to boast about as having achieved any kind of advantage with the white pieces. So black is completely fine here. All right, well, now let's go back and switch to the other move again. Okay, if bishop to g5, knight takes e4 is perfectly fine. Well, on knight f3, why don't we just play bishop to e7 here? The answer, of course, is that on bishop to g5, knight takes e4 is simply a blunder. Thanks for the piece. And so now we see, aha, this is the point behind knight to f3. This is why this changes things up. So after knight to f3, of course, we have two knights guarding the bishop, protecting it. And, okay, maybe black has a little compensation because white's knights are going to be a bit clumsy. If he kicks it and the knight goes back to e4, then he can play d5 and maybe run these pawns a little bit. But still, this is definitely not worth a piece. Okay. I wonder if there's even something trickier like knight takes d6, check, and not taking the piece. I'm not positive about that, but certainly I think taking the piece should be pretty good. Okay, so here after bishop to g5, black is forced to play something like just castling, and in a position like this, white should be a little bit better. Okay, so it's not a tremendous advantage, but it's a little something. His bishop is going to be more active than black's. He has the d5 square, the d6 pawn is slightly weak, so a little edge for white. Okay, so this is why after knight to f3, h6 is worthwhile. And on the other hand, why after knight to b3, there's no need to play it. Alright, so, the position just changes as a result. So with the knight on f3, white no longer has any possibilities of pushing the f-pawn, which is one way to play in some similar variations. And, okay, he will also have to take time out, as we mentioned before. So black played h6, but here white wants to play h3, as we mentioned before. So perhaps both sides lose a half a tempo, or whatever you want to call a move like h3. Alright, so we see some little finesses there. Now let's turn to a very similar variation, the Najdorf, and think about bishop to e2 here. And, okay, on e5, try to figure out the differences between knight f3 and knight to b3 now, and see if some of the same ideas apply. Okay, well, just taking a quick look here. a knight to f3, which is a move that I've mentioned quite a few times, in part because I've played I'm sorry, yeah, I'm confusing myself even. Okay, a knight to f3. Here, black should play h6, and this is in fact a good move. All right, so it stops bishop to g5, and okay, it's not clear what the knight is doing on f3 any longer, and okay, this is perfectly good for black. On the other hand, for knight to b3, okay, again, there's no real reason to play h6, or is there? Well, let's see. Bishop to e7, bishop to g5, and now, okay, what happens? If knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes g5, knight takes d6 check, king to e7, knight c8. Ah, well, this time the queen has to come over, rather than there being the convenient rook takes c8 capture. And now after queen to d5, okay, black has to play queen to c7, okay, bishop c4, and you can see that black is not quite able to complete his development as smoothly as he might like. So rook to f8 is semi-required at least, but now that means that the king is not escaping to the center so quickly. Additionally, after white castles, okay, again, it's a little bit awkward for black. If he plays queen to d7 trying to trade queens, there goes the e-pawn. If, again, he can't play rook to d8 because that would hang the f-pawn. If he plays queen to d6 or queen to d8, that would drop the b-pawn. So this is not as good. This is definitely a superior position for white. So this time, after bishop to g5, knight takes e4 is not really very good. This, I don't know if it's an outright question mark move, but it's at least dubious. It's giving white a real pull in the position. Probably is a mistake. Okay. On the other hand, black can play bishop to e6, but this is actually a surprising line. And now this actually doesn't have too much to do with our main topic, but it's just a very, very peculiar line that I thought I would show you. And I was extremely surprised when I discovered this variation about a year and a half ago, when I saw it in a Radjabov-Shirov game from the Linares tournament in 2008. So back in February of 2008. So bishop f6, queen d3, knight c6, castles, knight d4, takes, knight d5, takes, castles. And when I first saw this, I thought, okay, this is just some drawing variation. It's Petrov by way of the Sicilian defense. So, okay, black has these double D pawns, but, okay, we have opposite colored bishops, fairly symmetrical pawn structures, and if anyone should be better here, I would think it would be black, because he's got the open C file. I shouldn't say better, but if anyone has attacking chances, it would be black here with the open C file. If the white queen moves, maybe black could consider a move like d3. Queen to a5 might be on the agenda, and so on. So I didn't really take this very seriously. Okay. Well, white plays queen f3 here. Rook e8, bishop to d3. So it kind of clears the path here for everyone to get to the right square. And with the bishop on d3, again, the d3 idea is prevented. Okay, rook to e5. Preparing queen to a5 with a double attack. So king b1, queen a5. And, okay, again, it looks as if black is just completely fine. He's threatening the d5 pawn. He's going to double rooks on the e file. And what exactly is it that white has here? Well, white plays g4. Again, this looks kind of strange. So queen d5, takes, f4. And here, believe it or not, black is kind of short of moves, frankly. He only has one move that's really, I would say, even decent here, which is kind of amazing. So the only move here really is g5, and white's a little bit better after this. In the game, you'll see why g5 is an important move. As ugly as it looks, it's best. In the game, Radjabov-Shirov that I mentioned before, Shirov played bishop to h4, and this just loses. b4. And now the question is, what becomes of black's rook? It can't go to c5, it can't go to b5, it can't go to a5, e5, f5, g5, or h5. So every single square is covered. And of course it has no mobility vertically thanks to its own d-pawns. So here Shirov just kind of thrashed around a bit, trying to delay the inevitable loss of the exchange of a rook as long as possible, but went down. So rook c8, stop. Bishop to c4, okay, a4, rook c3, king b2. Actually, rook c1 is even better, but king b2 was sufficient. f5, g takes f5, and bishop to e4 is coming. So he sacked the exchange, but still after rook c1, and then this, black is forced to exchange rooks because if it moves to g4, rook c8 is checkmate next move. So he takes a5, and already Shirov had to resign. His king is cut off, and white's king will penetrate, and the endgame is just completely hopeless for black. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting variation here. Knight to b3, bishop b7, bishop g5, bishop b6, takes, queen d3, and so on. So there are various ways that black can avoid this line, but it does show that there is a little bit of poison to all of these bishop g5 setups. Okay, on the other hand, you might wonder about this. Well, okay, if knight to f3, h6 is so good, well, why is it so good? Can't white play a move like bishop to c4 here? But then, once you think about it, well, okay, why did we play bishop to e2 in the first place then? So here we can go back and then take up the idea, let's play bishop to e3 instead. And that way on e5, now on knight to f3, h6, we have bishop to c4. All of a sudden, this makes quite a bit of sense. Note too that if you try that with knight to b3, okay, here the issue isn't so much knight takes e4 tricks, but just the fact that, okay, let's say on h6, bishop c4. Here, white's position looks a little bit artificial. Now, there's still, okay, in both this variation and the main line with knight to f3, okay, d5 is horrible because of bishop to d5. Okay, so that's not the problem with knight to b3. But, okay, black can probably just play bishop to e6 here, and this should be perfectly fine. So there's no retreat to b3, which is a normal way for white to play when the knight is on f3. So there's that, if nothing else. But anyway, it is interesting to compare all these transpositional possibilities. And okay, also, of course, here black doesn't need to play h6. You can just play bishop to e6. And okay, now on bishop to g5, knight b to d7. Okay, the bishop's not coming to c4 anymore, so there's not really any point. On the other hand, okay, so again going back, knight f3. Well, what if bishop to e6 here? Here's the difference. Knight to g5 shows up. Okay, so this is the reason why black doesn't play bishop to e6 against this move order. So we see all of these little finesses. They're very, very interesting, and you know, it makes the game quite rich. So you can have these general ideas. You think, okay, I want to occupy the d5 square, but which way you retreat the knight in a position like this matters a great deal, as it does in the similar position in the classical, after the black knight goes to c6, bishop e2, e5, and so on. We could point out here as well that bishop to e3 in this position is not such a happy choice on account of knight to g4. Okay, so this is still one more difference. Well, you can play this against bishop to e3 against the knight orf as well, but here it's even better, because on bishop to g5, okay, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, bishop g7. There's an immediate pressure against this knight on d4, which isn't present via the knight orf move order. So there too we see some differences. Okay, so bishop to e3, knight g4, here, bishop g7, and now white can take time out for moves like bishop to e2 or h3, both of which are quite common. All right, so again, more Sicilian theory For those of you who loathe the Sicilian, I apologize, but it's a fascinating opening, and of course there are these transpositional issues in other lines as well. So the key thing here is, again, not to be a zombie, not to make these moves automatically just because they look kind of similar from one setting to the other, but to really stop and think, in a tournament game if necessary, in the preparation of your opening laboratory is even better, but whenever you do it, to at least take the time to figure out these little differences, what they might mean, and to prepare and to react accordingly. So, okay, I think next time we won't, we'll at least put the opening zombie series on hold for now, and in subsequent presentations we may continue the zombie chess theme, but we'll do so looking at other parts of the game. Okay, so thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed it, and of course learned something, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.